Hey YouTube, Kiritwick here, bringing you all an update to my Fabled Yu-Gi-Oh deck profile for June 2023. The Fableds were one of my favorite decks to use synchro-wise from the Dual Terminal storyline, and since I just done a Jirak deck profile recently, I figured we'd keep up with the actual storyline and go with another deck that conflicted with the Jiraks. During a good part of the beginning Dual Terminal storyline, being the Fableds, the synchro power that this deck has is definitely fun since the Fableds discards cannot miss timing for their special summons, so you can get out a bunch of different Fabled monsters to then use for the many different synchro plays we have, and we've gotten a good number of some other powerhouse synchros that we can incorporate into the deck since my last update. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So we'll go ahead and start off with the main deck monsters. The synchro monsters for the Fabled lineup definitely do rely on just that overall search power. So we are running 3 copies of Fabled Grimro. If you control a face-up Fabled monster, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard. Add 1 Fabled monster from your deck to your hand, except for Fabled Grimro. So it's just the option of having a Fabled monster on the field, and then being able to send this card from your hand to the graveyard to then add a different Fabled monster, depending on which one you need, from your deck to your hand, and then also setting up Grimro in your graveyard as a potential special summon for some of our other Fabled monsters, including Fabled Cruise. When this card is discarded to the graveyard, you can select 1 level 4 or lower Fabled monster in your graveyard, except this card, and special summon it. So then with this play, if you search out Cruise with Grimro, you can use Cruise to special summon the Grimro you just sent to the graveyard as one of these special summon monsters onto the field. A level 4 monster with some of the level 1 tuners can help to get out some of the other cards like Ard, Fabled Eurasian back onto the field for more draw power as well. Keeping up with the 3 ofs that we run the deck, also 3 copies of Fabled Ganesha. When it's discarded to the graveyard, you special summon it, and if it's special summoned this way, it gains 200 attack, and it is banished when it is removed from the field. So you do lose that resource, but it's a good one-off to have just for an easy special summon of a level 3. Working with our level 1 tuners, we can use Ganesha quite easily to summon out cards like the Fabled Godabi or the Fabled Unicorn, depending on which level 4 synchro we need for the play at the time. And 3 copies of Fabled Cerberus. The Fabled monsters do have some pretty simplistic effects with the Fabled Cerberus. If it's discarded to the graveyard, special summon it. That's all it is to this card. It's not a once per turn. If you have multiple Cerberus, you can get special summon out your multiple Cerberus onto the field. So very, very useful, being a level 2 tuner. And with one of our newer synchros for the deck being the Fabled Andrith, being a level 6, if you have this card with another level 4 monster, that can be your special summon for that level 6 synchro also. And also 3 copies of the Fabled Marcosia. If this card is in your hand, you can discard up to 2 monsters except for Fabled Marcosia, but including another Fabled monster. If you do special summon this card, if summoned this way, this card gains 200 attack for each monster discarded, and if it's discarded to the graveyard, you can add 1 Fabled Spell or Trap from your deck to your hand. You can only use each effect of Fabled Marcosia once per turn, but we run the Fabled Treason and then also the Stairway to a Fabled Realm, both useful spell and trap cards that we run at a lower number count in the deck. So Marcosia being able to search out these cards gives us more of a consistency to be able to add those cards, but also giving us a card that we can use for the engine to discard and activate many of our other Fabled cards also. And also the level 1 tuner that I spoke of before is the Fabled Chawa. 3 copies of this card. During your main phase, you can discard 1 Fabled monster and special summon this card from your hand. So you can have your combo just easily be Ganesha and Chawa, discarding Ganesha off of Chawa to special summon Chawa, and then Ganesha will just special summon back onto the field, and that can give you your level 4 synchro play right then and there, with the Fabled Chawa just being, like I said, a card that can start off a good number of the engine plays for you to use. And then for the last of the 3 ofs, 3 copies of the Fabled Nozochi. During your main phase, you can discard 1 Fabled monster and special summon this card from your hand. And when it's special summoned this way, you can special summon 1 level 2 or lower Fabled monster from your hand, just giving you another resource onto the field much more easily to not have to pay the discard cost, but still activating another additional Fabled discard by using the play that Nozochi was meant to do with this card. For the lower numbers for the Fabled monsters, we're running 2 copies of Fabled Luri. If it's discarded to the graveyard, special summon it. Very similar to Cerberus. The only reason I'm running 2 of this card is it is a level 1 monster. We don't really have much in line with level 3 synchros to go into. Cerberus matches up more with some of the other plays we can go for the synchro play, but you can use Luri for some easy link plays in the deck as well, or even just to level adjust into some of the other monsters we need to go into for it. And for the other two copies of the Fabled Yugioh. If this card's in your graveyard, you can discard one Fabled monster, and if you do, special summon this card but banish it when it leaves the field. You're going to use this effect of the Fabled Yugioh once per turn, very similar to the Fabled Kushano, which we'll see in a bit. Just being able to discard a Fabled monster and special summon this card. It's a level 2 tuner, just like the Fabled Cerberus, but not so much a hand setup discard play. It's more one you want to get into the graveyard, so you can use it with cards like your Chawa as a discard, or even Marcosia to then get into the graveyard and then have another special summon on the field. The fact that it banishes is one thing I don't like about it, but still useful at times when you need it. And then the last of the Fabled monsters is the one copy of the Fabled Kushano. You can discard one Fabled monster to the graveyard, except for Kushano, to add this card from your graveyard to your hand. So, unlike a Bonk, it doesn't special summon on the field. It adds Kushano back to your hand, but what's great about the add back to hand is that Kushano adds as an endless amount of supply for you to discard Fabled cards and adding it back to your hand, giving you more of an engine for other cards, whether it be Chawa or, Nozochi discard, you name it. As long as you can get Kushano back into your hand, you'll have more and more plays to go into. And eating away at your hand is fine, because you can get some of that drawback power with cards like Fabled Yugioh also. And then for some of the other engine that I run in the deck for monsters, I run 2 copies of Danger Nessie, 2 copies of Danger Bigfoot, and then 1 copy of Danger Jackalope, and 1 copy of Danger Tsuchinoko. So this Danger engine definitely does help as more of a power setup in the deck, being able to at least make use of all the other Danger monsters, having the search power with Nessie, special summon power and search power for the added power off of Nessie, destruction power with Bigfoot if need be, and then also the special summon power and draw power that they all provide depending on which one you have in your hand to reveal. And if you discard another card, like I said, your Fableds can't miss timing, so if you were to discard another card off of your Danger, you'll get the resolution of the Danger and additionally the Fabled monster special summon onto the field also. And then depending on which Danger monsters you can special summon out of the field, you can use the tuners like Cerberus to help get out some bigger boss monsters as well that we're running in the deck. And that is it for the main deck monsters. We've run a good majority of main deck monsters, but they all work so well together just for their special summon power that you want to have a low spell and trap count just so you can open up those majority of monsters and still have a, monster summon mechanic in the extra deck for you to go for. For the spells, we're running 1 copy of Stairway to a Fabled Realm. It's a field spell, and it's really all you need. When it's activated, you can send 1 Fabled monster from your deck to the graveyard, and you can target 1 Fabled monster in your graveyard, discard 2 cards. If you do, add that monster to your hand. You go and use this effect of Stairway to Fabled Realm once per turn, and if your Fabled monster attacks an opponent's monster and you have less cards in your hand than your opponent, your monster gains attack equal to the difference of numbers times 200, and during damage calculation only. So it's a power boost, but it's more of a recycle setup card as well in the deck. You only need the 1 copy because you can search it when you discard your Fabled Marcosia to the graveyard, and if you have multiples of this card, otherwise it's just going to be an engine for you to discard for other cards really not serving any other purpose. It doesn't have any graveyard effect. It's best on the field. So when you get that 1, unless your opponent destroys it, that's really all you need it for. For the other spells, we're running 3 copies of Dark World Dealing. In my last update to this deck, I was running Monster Reincarnation, but the more I tested with Dark World Dealing, the more I got consistency for draw and discard, with also just being able to disrupt if my opponent had a particular card in their hand, but still being able to keep my plus, because whatever I would discard to the graveyard, it would more than likely be a Fabled monster that can at least come back onto the field for me to use also. And then also the 2 copies of Desynchro. This just gives me more draw power if you go into Rajin, drawing up to 2 cards, and then you make use of those 2 cards, getting you 0 cards in your hand again. You can use Desynchro, going back into your 2 monsters you have on the field, and then going back into Rajin again for more and more draw power. And lastly, for the spells, the 1 copy of Pot Avarice. Like I said, you're going to go through a lot of the monsters very, very quickly, so having some form of recycle power in the form of Pot Avarice definitely does come in handy to get that draw power and then putting back any necessary monsters in your extra deck also. With the only trap that we run in the deck being the 1 copy of Fabled Treason. You target 1 Fabled monster in your graveyard and 1 face-up monster or face-up card on the field. Discard 1 card. If you do, special summon that monster from your graveyard and destroy that other card. power on the field. So it's a destruction effect. It definitely does help just as a setup when you're trying to get a board on the field, because a lot of our bigger boss monsters, synchro monsters, can easily be summoned from the extract to the field and have an effect negation against your opponent, and then relying on this card that you can search out with your Fabled Yugioh onto the field to set up, as long as you have the Fable monster in your graveyard. Discarding the card to special summon that other monster from your graveyard gives you just another boss monster Fable to summon out, so it can even be one of your bigger synchro monsters depending on what you discard for it, because there are no special summon restrictions for the Fable monsters that you can summon out with Fabled Treason. And that is it for the main deck. Moving on now to the extra deck. I run 2 copies of Fabled Yugioh. When this card is synchro summon, if you have 1 or less cards in your hand, you can draw until you have 2 cards in your hand. So ideally, you want to have no cards in your hand, so you can draw 2 cards off of Yugioh, and then those 2 cards could just be what you need to continue the engine. If you open up your Chawa and Ganesha in your hand, then you can use both of those cards to summon out a Fabled Yugioh, and then all the more power if you draw cards like Desynchro or Dark World Duel Links for you to, set them on the field, then activate the Desynchro, sending out your Yugioh for the 2 cards used to summon it, and then making it again to just keep drawing cards. We're also running 2 copies of Fabled Andrith, the level 6 synchro. If it's special summon, your opponent can discard 1 card to negate this effect. Otherwise, you can draw 2 cards, then discard 1 card. If a monster is sent to the opponent's hand to the graveyard, except during the damage step, you can target one of those monsters, special summon it to your field, but negate its effects, and you can only use each effect of Fabled Andrith once per turn. So a bigger level Yugioh in a way. You don't have to draw up to 2 cards, you can just draw 2 cards and then discard 1. So if you do open up a Fabled monster that gains an additional special summon, you can discard it off of the Fabled Andrith. If you discard a Fabled Cerberus and then get the special summon onto the field, all the better, because then you meet the requirements with Fabled Andrith and Fabled Cerberus to summon out bigger boss monsters like Clearwing Synchro Dragon from the extra deck as well. For the other synchros, 1 copy of Fabled Yugioh and 1 unicorn. Yugioh is good just to sit on if you have 0 cards in your hand, because it cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects, meaning your opponent has to either spin it, return it to the hand, or just send it to the graveyard, and otherwise you're just sitting on a monster that's definitely difficult to get around. If you have 3 or more cards in your hand, you destroy this card during the end phase. Just, it's very easy to clear your hand with a Fabled deck. And then unicorn makes your opponent have to play around your own plays, because when they activate a card, if you have the same number of cards in your hand as them, then you just negate any spell, monster, or trap that they may activate. If you both have 0 cards in hand and they try just to go for the top deck game, you can have unicorn be stopping all those different plays they may try to do. And then for more of the generic synchros, 1 copy of Formula Synchron with our Chawa and our Fabled Luri. You can easily make this draw power engine as well. 1 Herald of the Arclight. If you don't want to go for the Unicorn or Yugioh play, you just have another negation with this card. 1 Brionek for more discard power for a once per turn discard, but still being able to give you more special summons on the field. And then also the additional lineup with your other monsters, and this card gives you a discard power that you can rely on to at least return some of your opponent's cards back to their hand as well for those summons. And then for the additional synchro monsters that we run on top of those ones as well, 1 Clearwing Synchro Dragon, 1 Chaos Angel, and the 1 Baron de Fleur. The Chaos Angel I've been really liking in the deck. Since we mostly use light synchro monsters you control are unaffected by monster effects activated by your opponent, and all of our Fabled monsters are light synchro, so they're just protected by our opponent's card effects when we can summon out Chaos Angel, and then having that additional play to rely on. And for the Link monsters, 1 copy of Nightmare Cerberus, 1 Nightmare Phoenix, and the 1 Nightmare Unicorn. All discard cards, so when we go for the discard, whether it be for the destruction or spin back power, if it was a Fabled monster, we're still getting the benefits of that Fabled monster on the field also. And then as for some of the go-to plays in the deck, I went over some of the simplistic ones. The discard power is the strongest thing in the Fabled deck, so depending on what you discard, if you open up Chawa and either of these 2 monsters, you have a play right then and there. Discarding with Chawa, if you discard Ganesha, you can then summon both of these cards, because when Ganesha is summoned, it special summons onto the field. Chawa using it for synchro, remember the Ganesha will be banished, but that can give you a Yugioh, but only summon this if you have no other cards in your hand. Otherwise, you can go for Unicorn and then play around when you know your opponent's going to have a specific amount of cards in their hand compared to you as well, depending on what they activate. So if you went second against them and they set up a good amount of their board on the field, as long as you keep that 1 or no cards in your hand when you summon out Unicorn, you can just go right into their plays if they have no cards in hand or are relying completely on the board field. Then you can just negate anything they may try to activate against you and your Unicorn and any other monsters you summon out. For the setup with our Fabled Yugioh, we have the discard play with this card. card with our ideal discard play being the Fabled Yugioh. So with this card, discarding up to 2 cards, except this card to special summon this card, and then it gains 200 attack. So you'll summon out Marcosia off the discard, and then use the Fabled Yugioh for that discard as well. Having the same play before, not even taking up your normal summon, but giving you a level 6 synchro. So you can then go into the Fabled Andrith, and if it's special summon, your opponent can discard 1 card to negate this effect. Otherwise, you'll draw 2 cards and then discard another. So depending on what you open, if you open up cards like the Fabled Cruise, then as your draw 2, you'll have to draw 1 additional card as well, discarding 1, so you can discard the Cruise. And then the other card you had in your graveyard could be cards, what you already had, the Fabled Yugioh, summoning it back out onto the field, giving you the same play as I mentioned before, using both of these cards to get out some of the bigger monster effect negation on the field as well. And then from there, all you have to do is have 1 more monster. You can have the negation of Clearwing Synchro on the field, or if you can go 1 step higher with your monsters, depending on what you can summon out, if you can get another discard for a Fabled Yugioh or another special summon option for those monsters. You can even go 1 step higher for the Baron de Fleur Synchro, having another level 8 monster and a level 2 to go into this bigger boss monster also. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Fableds, like I say, are one of my favorite dual terminal decks. I always love updating them with the new support that we've had for a good while. Maybe we'll see some new support later down the road for Fableds as well. But as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And Kira, Twig out.